Today, I have a wonderful guest, Mr. Jim Farrell. He is an ex-law enforcement officer who now is actually the director of the police force for the Springfield Schools District, and he has a podcast that he has started called No BS with Jim Farrell. Welcome, Jim. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. This is exciting. This is fun.
Yes. I'm always apt to, I enjoy reaching out to new people and finding out what people are up to. Now, I understand you're ex-law enforcement. I did a little shout out on Facebook saying I was looking for interviews with ex-law enforcement, and one of our mutual friends actually introduced us. Yes, and so tell me exactly what type of law enforcement were you?
I was a deputy sheriff in Greene County here in Springfield, Missouri for 20 years.
Awesome. And then now you are, it says director of school police. Explain that for some people. I know there's guards and things at the schools. Is that basically what it is? You kind of over them, or?
Well, actually, the officers in Springfield Public Schools are sworn peace officers. They have full arrest authority. They currently carry their commission through the Greene County Sheriff. There's actually we're short a person, so we're staffed at 25 right now. But I mean that's pretty good. But it's also the largest district in the state. So
yeah, Springfield School District's huge. And so when you're in law enforcement, I always ask everybody the same question. What was your most disturbing case while working in the Greene County Sheriff's?
You know, law enforcement, as you know, and you've written enough on your blogs about this. Law enforcement officers tend to be pretty adept at burying, the bad, right? We bury it and we get rid of it. So I think that for me to actually pick a single case would be difficult, but the easy answer for me would also be that it was cases involving kids, and anything involving child victims was truly that was the hard ones, and any one of them were just difficult because the kids didn't have a choice in the matter, regardless of the crime, whether it was abuse or some type of sex crime. It just didn't matter.
Yeah, those are always. It seems like it's more dreadful when it's against a child, just because they're so helpless. They're naive. They make easy targets for people, and I don't know. I'm kind of the same way. I've written about all these cases, but the ones that really I have to work at, you have to separate your emotions from what you're doing is what you do, and so. As a writer, I can't let it dwell on it. I don't have a badge. I just, I can write, and I know how to market. And I've got my blog up to a potential of 500,000 people. And the whole reason is to raise awareness for cold cases that are forgotten and bring in leads for law enforcement. And so we have brought in leads on 4 different cases where we were directly related to the end of the case.
Awesome.
And I have to say it that way because one case was 54 years old. We brought in 6 witnesses that verified a story that we had. And basically we solved the case for the woman, but it's so old, we were basically told it's most likely never going to be in court.
Right.
There's like 3 people left that if they can get enough now, they might be able to take it to court, but she was just glad to get answers.
Sure.
So I have to say we've had 4 cases that helped lead to a conclusion is the way I usually put that.
There you go.
So, but just basically I come from as a victim's advocate because I want to help these people and support these people and let them know that strangers can care. And I think from what I've learned from talking to other law enforcement officers, it's basically the same concept for you guys. You just want to care about a stranger and do what you can to protect and serve and help. Is that the way it was for you? What got you into law enforcement?
Yeah, I was a little different. I didn't grow up in Springfield, Missouri. I grew up in New York, and for me, it was more about I thought it was a good career, if you will, and then the caring about the victims came later as I got exposed to some of those things. Because in New York, I mean, there's a different mindset among people there, and it was, well, you do your 20 years with the department, you make a lot of money, and you retire and you move somewhere else. That's kind of the life plan for most officers there. And so for me, that was what I thought this was, and found out fairly quickly that here in Southwest Missouri at the time, the pay was not very good. The retirement wasn't good at all, and still is subpar for some departments. And it became more about a passion for me.
Yeah. Well, and I found there's a lot of law enforcement that's that way. And I think it kind of, when you see and you're exposed to some of these victims' family members, you have to be pretty hardened to not care. Now, of course, you're trained to not show your emotions, to think through your emotions, put them on the back burner until the job's done, and then deal with it however you can. But I think as, from one human to the next, it would be hard to see those things and not care in some level, and so that's where I kind of find now, I have a P.O. box in another city because of one very specific Springfield case. I get so many questions about this one case, and I'm sure you have to. You probably know what I'm talking about already. The Springfield 3. Yeah. What is were you in the district at that time?
I was an employee at the sheriff's office. I worked in corrections. That's where I started my career, and so I wasn't involved in that investigation. Other than I could tell you through other cases I worked, I was honored to meet Janice, and she having never been involved in a case like, and especially that case, and in meeting Janice, she gave a lot of insight, and I learned a lot from her on how to be appropriate and sympathetic and empathetic with victims. Janice, in my opinion, is a rock star to survive and continue to do what she does. She is a rare person. So no, I wasn't involved in that. But like I said, I was working in the jail at the time, so we were constantly trying to not trying, but if we heard of anybody that may have information, meaning inmates, we were always passing it on to Springfield Police.
Right. Right. That's where I am. I have a P.O. box in a different city because specifically of that case, because I was traveling a lot, doing lots of signing events and, different things. And every time they wanted to ask me about that case, and they always had a theory. Everybody has their own theory. And this one gentleman, and I use that term loosely, one guy, that reminds me of a story. I said gentleman very, very sarcastically in one of my videos talking about an ex-mobster, and somebody corrected me in the comments of YouTube and said, I don't understand why you called him a gentleman. And I'm like, well, that's Southern sarcasm for you. I'm sorry. That
Right.
So I use it loosely, but this gentleman said he had this big long theory, and he kind of creeped me out, and he's like, I sent this big long 6-page letter to Janice's P.O. box, but it was returned because her box was closed down. Can I send it to you? I said, okay, here's my P.O. box in another city, and but he sent me 6 pages front and back, all the way out in the margins, everything, laying out his theory of this case. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this guy makes sense. And so, of course, I called Springfield PD and told them all about it and sent this to them. And I don't know if they ever contacted him or not, but they have the letter and the information. But that is the case why I have a P.O. box somewhere else, because I'm like, oh man, I've heard everything all the way down to aliens, abductions. They have so many crazy theories. I have a theory of my own, but I'm not going to go public with it because I feel like I have seen people actually, their careers as crime writers be destroyed because they go public with this theory and it's blown out of the water and then they can't recover from it. And I always, I work as a victims advocate for Missouri Missing. And so I'm coming from a standpoint as I wouldn't want to put Janice through that. I don't want to get her hopes up thinking that, oh my gosh, this makes sense. And oh my gosh, this is it. And then dash them again, and so that's kind of where I'm at. It's like, of course I have a theory. Everybody has their theory. But until there's evidence, you have to keep your theories under wraps until you get it. So when you retired from law enforcement, how did you get into the public school deal, and how is that different from law enforcement on the streets? Of course, I know you're in a school setting, but I'm sure you have issues that are similar and issues that are different.
Sure. So I actually retired as a result of being offered a job in the school system after applying. I was contacted by a couple people that I knew that were involved in the school district, and they told me that the outgoing director was retiring and asked me if I would be interested. And I knew at that point I was a captain at the sheriff's office, and I knew that my opportunities for promotion were very slim, simply because not that the competition wasn't there from other captains, but my opportunities were slim because both majors at the time and the sheriff were young. We were all around the same age. So I knew the sheriff had no intention of leaving, and which would create no growth upward. And I thought this was an opportunity for me to run my own department. And so I took the opportunity and applied, and I was fortunate, and I would say I was blessed that I was selected. With that said, the way I describe school policing, and I did almost 6.5 years in narcotics in my early career, and I watched SWAT teams from the sheriff's office to Springfield Police, and I watched homicide detectives and child abuse detectives, and I would tell you school policing is very much law enforcement, but it's like being in a specialized unit, right? So specialized unit, when I was in narcotics, our focus was drugs and taking drugs off the street. If we came across a burglar who was selling drugs, that was a double win, right? But that was our focus. So we had a single focus, and it's very much the same for other units in police departments and sheriff's offices. So school police is no different. It's a specialized unit with a single focus. And I mean, I say single focus, but there's many things we do, but your main focus is keeping the students and staff of the buildings that you work in safe. That's priority number one for school police. Unfortunately, that often involves investigating think of it as a patrolman level, not really a detective level, but it involves us investigating crimes, whether it's crimes committed by students or oftentimes it's not unheard of by adult parents. But the majority of what we do, it revolves around that safety concept, whether it's an upset parent that doesn't like the way their child was treated or something like that, or it's building those relationships with those kids. we've dealt with a lot of things in Springfield Public Schools, and the majority of the things we've dealt with that have been very serious, because it was a result. We found out because as a result of having relationships with the students. The officers in the schools knew the kids. The kids had a trust with that officer, and the kids would let us know, hey, there's going to be a big fight, or so and so said that they're the victim of an assault over the weekend. Can you help? Things like that. So very much a specialized unit, and I would tell you that I've worked with some incredible people in my life, and the officers at Springfield Public Schools, they're right up there with them. It's pretty, and I don't say that just because I'm their boss. I say that because they truly are. We have a handful of retired officers from other agencies, but the rest are all people working on their career with us, and it's awesome to watch.
Do you find it's harder to maybe not harder, but maybe you have to have a little more finesse when you deal with children, or do you find it's basically the same?
Absolutely. You have to, there's a lot of times that I'm sitting there going, well, we would deal with this a whole lot differently on the street as we would in the school building. And I don't mean that we sacrifice officer safety, but I would tell you that, maybe your level of patience increases when you're in a school building as opposed to when you're a street officer and you've got 15 more calls waiting,
Right,
so.
right. And if your whole concept is to keep the kids safe, then you have to have more patience with the very person you're trying to keep safe. So that would be kind of a conflict of interest. How does that work? I know you can't really get into details, but how does that work? If you have a child that you're supposed to keep safe, but a child that's causing as an example, say a child is causing a physical altercation, how do you keep that person safe and yet still solve the issue? And because you're still supposed to be keeping that kid safe too, even though that kid is actually causing the problem. So that would be kind of hard to manage. Is how do you deal with that?
I think we're fortunate in most of the time. I won't say all of the time, but most of the time, the students we deal with are fairly compliant when we, and sometimes just adhere to verbal commands, if you will. And the level of resistance is a lot different than what you might experience working a 10-hour shift at Greene County or Springfield Police as a patrolman. So your resistance levels are not the same. So for instance, it's the rarity that we're forcing a kid to the ground to put handcuffs on them. More often than not, it's just kind of grabbing their elbow and going, come on, you're not going to do this, or you get between two of them, maybe, wanting to fight, and you separate them, and then you really separate them from each other. You have help from someone else, whether it's a staff member or an officer, and you go in two different directions with them, still to wind up in the school principal or administrator's office. And then you let them deal with it on the school discipline side, because oftentimes no crime has occurred yet.
Right. So you find, I'm sure it's like this in even cases on the street somewhat, but if you have that level of authority in the schools, they know that you have the ability to take care of it if you need to, but then you also have the compassionate side to where they have built a trust with you. To me, it seems like that is kind of what will lessen those incidences. You'll have less chances of that because you've kind of worked on both ends.
Yes, typically that is. I mean, I can tell you I've been to high school football games and you'll see young kids at the game, right? And they're high-fiving the officers that were their middle school officer, or they're talking with them, and those relationships don't quit, so I think it carries on. But yeah, we just, certainly the relationship building is huge for us. And we certainly have more of that ability than the average street officer because they are backed up 10 or 15 calls and they have to respond to, as we talked earlier, to those victims. Whereas a lot of times one of our bigger roles is just being visible and present, right? And as you can imagine, and it works the same way, quite honestly, in downtown Springfield. Two people are not going to throw punches when there's 3 police officers standing right there where they're at.
Sometimes the uniform itself is
absolutely.
I've seen where I live. There is a car lot that is at the end of the road, but it's kind of a dark and it's kind of outside the city limits. And they always have a police car sitting there, but 90% of the time it's empty. And I'm like, my son asked me, he's like, why is it empty? I said, because just the car is a deterrent. A lot of times somebody's going to have to really be scoping that place out to see that it's just a car, and even if they do, they're going to be like, well, where's the guy? Where's the girl? Well, there is their officer, is around here somewhere, I think that they do have a security protocol besides just the car, but I know just that image is enough to make some people back off. And so I think that probably helps in your instance as well, especially in schools when you're dealing with children.
Yes, and just like you said, I mean, in the more heavily populated, more often on the coasts, they park marked units and put mannequins in the car on high, roads that are traveled at high speeds. And you see the cars braking and slowing down immediately when they see that car. Yes, I mean it's a we have the opportunity to get in those classrooms with those kids when we're invited in, and we talk about various topics, but it's just really walking through the schools and watching the officers interact with the kids they interacted with every day.
Mhm.
And I told the officers and have said it from day one when I started, treat those schools like it's your neighborhood, your community,
Mhm.
and think of yourself as the old mindset, the neighborhood cop.
Mhm.
And that's your neighborhood, and you get it going the way it needs to be going, and it's not just building a relationship with the students; it's building those relationships with staff,
Mhm.
because staff also needs to feel safe, right?
I do.
I mean,
Yeah.
with everything that's going on in the world, the staff members also want to and need to feel safe, and
Mhm.
you have those relationships with them for that reason.
Mhm.
Relationship is probably the biggest and most valuable tool school police have.
Do you think that, and I don't know if there's been any studies on this, I didn't do the research on this, but do you think by a young person that may be somewhat troubled having a relationship with a law enforcement officer during their school years, do you think that helps them maybe make better choices as they grow up? Do you think maybe that helps in the long run, maybe that helps keep a few off the streets? Do you think it makes a difference for what they become later?
I do. I don't know that there are any studies like you said. I think a lot of what we do with those relationships and the mentorships and things like that is very similar to DARE.
Mhm.
And as you know, they've done away with a lot of DARE programs nationwide because what does everybody want? They want data, and there's no data to prove that DARE actually stopped kids from using drugs. Well, maybe not. But how many adults are now more comfortable talking to police officers and dealing with police officers because of their DARE officer, right? So it's the same with us.
Mhm.
We strive to make that happen, and it's just that important. But
Mhm.
I wish I'm with you there. I wish that we knew, and
Mhm.
we may never know.
Right.
But I wish that we knew how many things we deterred by
Mhm.
being a visible presence,
Mhm.
and I wish we knew how many lives our officers impacted.
Mhm.
And I would say that goes even to the street officers for
Mhm.
Springfield and Greene County. We'll never know. We
Right.
will never know how just being courteous and being nice to someone one day had an impact, and a good impact on their life.
Well,
Um,
you might encourage more law enforcement officers. You might encourage
yes,
people. Well, and I think of people too that those kids that are so troubled, they don't have a family unit at home. They may only have one parent or one parent working. When you have one parent, that parent has
right,
to work double time to keep things together. And so that parent doesn't have enough resources to be everything the child needs. I won't say every time, but a lot of times. And so
right.
maybe just that child having that extra adult figure in their life fills a gap that I think our society has created by
Mhm.
not having a lot of kids just don't have what they need from their parents. They don't get you need the authority, but you also need to feel safe. You also need to feel valued. You need all these things psychologically as a child. And when you've got one person scrambling trying to provide it all, it's almost impossible. And so I think you're probably affecting these kids more than people realize. Just being there and saying, hey, I'm having trouble. So many kids don't have dads at home. Maybe you fulfill that. Maybe if someone comes to you and says, Officer Farrell, can I talk to you? They might be able to, that you're fulfilling a part of their life that they can't even really express. They can't
Yeah,
tell you that they're missing something because their single mom is working herself to death trying to make ends meet.
right.
Or a single dad. I know, we always say single mom, there's single dads out there doing it too, but I think you guys are probably making more difference than people will ever really know because we don't know how many times what if this child is suicidal? And you're the
Mhm.
one person there that they feel safe around, the one person there that tells them they're valued, even though they've been bullied and they don't think of their own value. So
Right.
you may have saved lives just from being there. And so I think it's really amazing what you guys do. I hate it that our society, I'm kind of conflicted. I hate it that our society needs this. You
Right.
know,
I do too.
I hate it. I hate it that the kids have to have uniformed officers there so they can learn. I hate that part. But I'm glad that there's people like you there to do it in a very humanitarian way. Do you find that this is more fulfilling or about the same, or how do you rate this?
It's I get asked that a lot, especially by like my old buddies at the sheriff's office, or similar type questions. How are you liking it? Do
Hmm.
you miss us? That type of thing.
Right, right.
And I just tell people it's different,
Mhm.
right? I mean, it's just different. So for me, at my level, I enjoy the challenge of running a team like this, right? And I had that privilege at the sheriff's office too. I wasn't micromanaged there either,
Mhm.
and so it's a different type of fulfillment. It's not the same, not greater or less than, but just different.
My dog, hang on just a second. My dog's
That's okay.
making noise and my chair decided to sink down. So we'll edit that part out. My chair, the hydraulics on my chair. All of a sudden I'm just like, wee. And then my dog, hey, Luke, stop that. I have a little fuzzy Bichon, and he wants to be my mommy, but he also wants to fluff up the carpet. I'm like, the carpet's not gonna fluff, buddy. So we'll edit that piece out. So, so anyways, okay. So when you are doing your podcast, you have a podcast called No BS with Jim Farrell. What made
Yes.
you decide to start podcasting?
Well, the pandemic hit, and I
Mhm.
was spending a lot more time at my computer, either responding to emails or quite frankly, trying to ensure that we were going to keep our folks working. Because schools were shutting down, and I was working with people above me and below me, but I spent a lot of time in my office, dealing with some of that. And typically I would listen to music, but I needed to concentrate a little better. But I like that background noise, as I'm working. So I found podcasts, and you can imagine I gravitated towards podcasts that would at least make sense for a guy like me or what I've done in my career in life to enjoy. So I gravitated towards police type podcasts and podcasts by special operations guys in the military. And what I found was a lot of them were just talking to people, having good conversations, just like you and I are having now. But I was getting something out of them, like health wise. I was hearing all these guys about 50 years old, my age, were having some of the same health issues. They're not sleep. They don't know what it's like to sleep through the night. And, and I'm like, that's me. I can't sleep through the night. Never have. For 27 years now. I was like, well, so I started trying some of their solutions. I'm like, well, that worked. That was kind of helpful. Well, there might be something in these podcasts, right?
Yeah.
So then I did what, any guy my age would do. I talked to at the time, my 22-year-old daughter. And I said, Lauren, what would you think if I did this? What are your thoughts? Because I would tell you that, and I've told people this, I wouldn't say I was great at anything in my career, but if I was good at anything, I was good at talking to people, whether they were victims, suspects, or coworkers, subordinates, or higher ups. I felt like I had a good ability to talk to people. And so I asked Lauren, and Lauren's like, "Oh my gosh, Dad, that would be great." And Lauren's my kid; she'll tell me, and she is that brutally honest. If she thought it was dumb, she'd be like, "Dad, don't even waste your time." Yeah. Well, I was thinking about it and researching. Well, for Christmas, Lauren hands me a box, and I don't even have my own personal laptop yet. I've had a laptop, but it's always worked, right? And in it is a microphone with a USB microphone, and with a note, "Dad, you need to do your podcast." And I was like, "Wow, that's pretty cool." Okay. Yeah. So at the same time, a buddy of mine who's retiring this month from Kansas City PD, he's a major. Great guy. We were in the Army together. He's starting a podcast. So I'm like, oh, I got to listen to his, right? And he connects me with the guy he's partnered with, who's really on board on the technical side of podcasting, right? And so I talked with him, and I just asked him questions like, hey, number one, is it expensive? And all this kind of thing. And he was my guide, my mentor in it. And so I did it, and I started it. And honestly, and you may feel the same way. When I'm done interviewing a person for the podcast, I'm almost on like a little bit of a high, right? Like I'm excited. I'm like, man, I forgot how fun that was, right? And that's what it's become for me. And as it started growing, and it's not a Sonoma 500,000, on your blogs, but as it started growing, I started getting some feedback, positive feedback from people. And I knew my whole concept was, I know a ton of interesting people, and I wanted to do my interviews in person. So as of now, everybody's come to my house, and we do it here in my man cave, if you will. It's kind of a bar, and it's just a relaxed setting. And I when I have a female that I'm interviewing, my wife is always home, because I don't ever want the person being interviewed to not be comfortable, right? And
there's always that "it looks bad" concept.
Oh, it looks horrible. I don't want the.
I'm a preacher's kid, so I got that all my life. It looks bad, and I'm like, yes, I'm drinking out of this cup instead of this cup. This is keto Gatorade. But I don't. Every time I drink out of this, someone's like, "You're drinking wine." It's like, it's keto Gatorade. This is a Christmas cup. The kids call it my fancy cup. But every time I make a video and I drink out of that, someone says something. I was like, "Ah, come on."
And I've had the guests on that are like me. They love their bourbon, and we'll drink bourbon as we're talking. And we don't ever go past one cup, but it's just kind of cool. And like I said, I've had that. It ended up where some people had suggested, don't just interview people. We like to hear what your thoughts are. And so I've started doing what a gal who helped build my website suggested, calling them minisodes. And I keep them 20 minutes or less, and it's just me sharing. And I've done everything, but I've hit topics like kneeling for the flag and my thoughts on it, to suicide. And here in Springfield, we experienced that with a really well loved officer. It sucked, but I was able to talk about suicide a little bit and my thoughts on it, and because I think it's easy to be critical, and it's not easy, especially, and it because you've talked to enough of us, for cops to be critical, it's easy to think of that as a weak move, that's just weak. Well, I've had, and I shared it, I've had some incredibly lonely times in my life, and I've been very fortunate that those thoughts didn't enter my mind at that time. I've never been that desperate, but I cannot be critical of somebody that has been that desperate.
No. So, I think that people need to give law enforcement officers a break when it comes to that, because people might say it's a weak move, but I'm sitting here going, you have no idea what that person's carrying. They're not just carrying their baggage, they're carrying baggage from every case that they've dealt with. And some people, they just don't have a way of releasing that, and it builds up to the point that they can't handle it anymore. And I think podcasts like yours and other people, that they can see that they're not the only one. It's almost like community therapy almost, because you feel like, oh wow, I'm not I'm not that uncommon. There's other people, and so that gives them a little bit of a release, just knowing that they're not alone.
Yeah.
So when it comes to suicide, people just they need to back off a little bit, because
Well,
you don't know what state that person's mind was in.
yeah, and you've been around cops enough to know, and that's what I think the general public doesn't understand. We are our own biggest critics. We criticize ourselves more than the media or the public ever could. And when the bad ones, and listen, it's not just police officers that get the bad attention, or the bad police officers that get the attention. It's the bad people in this world. It's not newsworthy to share those good stories.
Right.
What's newsworthy is to share that somebody robbed somebody, or a police officer did this and is now looking at a homicide charge because he took a life, or she took a life, and that we're only paying attention to the bad ones. We don't hear about the good ones, and the police officers, people probably don't get it, but we criticize those things more than the general public ever will, because it impacts us.
Yeah, people don't realize we don't get to see the news anymore. Our news media has become a business, and they're out for money and ratings. And they know that negative news, anything they can do to shock you, is going to be something they're going to get more eyeballs on, and they're going to get paid more for. So they forget the good stuff and just bombard you with every shocking detail they can. And if they can't find enough, they'll kind of twist it to where it is shocking enough to get you. And so I think that's another thing that these podcasts are good. I'm not regulated by someone who says you've got to scare people. I would make more money. I'll tell you right now, I would make more money if I went into the gory details of every case. But I know that poor mother, poor father, those children, they are reading my stuff and depending on me to raise awareness about it. They don't need to know those details.
Right.
And if they do know them, they don't need to rehash them. They don't need to know that. And so I've got a lot of flack for it. But I'm sitting here going, I'm trying to help these people. I'm not trying to re-victimize these people. I know how to write. I know how to market online. So that's what I do. I don't have a badge. I have an ink pen and some marketing skills. And so I think that these podcasts really serve a good platform, because we're not in it because somebody's telling us what to say. We're in it for our own whatever we're after. And I like that, because people also don't know that most of the media is owned by like 4 companies.
Right.
They're all owned by the same people. That's why you see the same terrible things. And then in my experience, and this makes me just, it makes my blood boil. A lady's father was stabbed in the stomach and left to die. He was a Vietnam veteran. He served for 25 years in the Air Force. So that means he went back even after Vietnam was over. He continued. Then when he retired from the service, he went in and worked at a local hospital for veterans and volunteered there even after he retired from there. So he spent his entire lifetime in service of humanity. He got stabbed in the stomach by someone who wasn't in the country legally and left to die. He died on the 20th anniversary. They told the daughter, give us the details, we'll cover it. The 21st anniversary of this unsolved case, they told her that it wasn't newsworthy. I'm like, how can you look somebody in the eye and say it's not newsworthy that your Vietnam veteran father, who gave his life for his country from the day he became an adult, it's not newsworthy that he was stabbed and left to die? But yet last year it was good because it was the 20th anniversary,
Right.
And so that's where I really go and try to highlight these obscure cases that just don't have enough media attention. Because I'm like, it's not fair. If it was your dad, your brother, your mother, your sister, your kid, it would be news every dang day. For the rest of eternity, it would be news. And so that's kind of where I go. And I feel like that's kind of what makes me different. I can make a lot more money if I did. But that's not what I'm in it for.
Sure.
So now that you started your podcast and you cover all these different topics, what is your plan with your podcast? Where would you like to go with your podcast? What do you want to achieve?
Right now, I'm, you gotta, and I don't know if you experienced it, but I've got to rein myself in, because it becomes easy to pay attention to your downloads and the number of downloads you've had, right?
Yeah.
And that wasn't my mission. My mission was to introduce the people that listen to the podcast to some really amazing people I've had the privilege and honor of knowing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ideally, I could keep it all in person, but I think I'm going to have to maybe communicate with you a little more through email and find out how to do what we're doing now and do it electronically.
Yeah, a lot easier.
Because I know people all over this country, and I try to go. It's easy for me to stick with the cops, right? I mean, I know so many, but I just I know people outside of law enforcement that are just people would be. I talked to a gentleman who works for Homeland Security last weekend that I've known for 20 years, and he shared how his job has taken him to working with the CIA on more than one occasion.
Wow.
Like, how cool! He told me, he says, "I'll come on the podcast," but he doesn't live here, right? And so it's I think it's going to probably grow that way. I've been asked. I have had a couple people offer to sponsor, and I'm sure you have many times. For me, I kind of like the freedom of talking to who I want to talk to,
Right.
and I want to allow them the freedom to say whatever they want to say without offending a sponsor.
Right.
So mostly this has become or started as a hobby. That was cheaper than golf. If I started golfing again, right? I used to golf, but I quit. So I was like, well, it's cheaper than buying new clubs and all that stuff.
Yeah.
and it's probably turned into a passion. Just because, like I said, I get done with an interview, and I'm just, I don't know if amped up is the right word, but I'm like, man, that was so
It's almost
fun.
like a high. It's an emotional high of
Yes, very much
accomplishment.
so.
It's
Very much
accomplishment.
so.
Really what it is. Yeah.
So,
I
you know,
enjoy
I
it.
mean, I love it. It's fun. You know, you do the same thing, and it's just what a neat way to reach people. And what has surprised me is how or where we've reached people. I got a friend that works for the State Department, and he's stationed in Brazil. So that's an easy one. I know why the downloads are happening in Brazil.
Right.
But I've had downloads in Italy, Germany, Russia, and I'm going, how? I don't, you know, but somebody out there, and multiple downloads, right? Not just one and done.
Right.
And I'm like, this is amazing. So
it's word of mouth from somebody you know there. I haven't figured out why I get so many downloads for my books in Australia. That's what I want to know. I'm like, I don't know anybody in Australia, but Australia is second to the US, and then the UK is third. I've got 10 books on top of everything else, and I do author coaching and all this crazy stuff. But you have to wonder where that comes from. I'm like, Australia, really? Cool.
And like you said, word of mouth.
Exactly. I was like, I don't know anybody in Australia, but that's great. Somebody likes what I do.
Correct.
So, but well, I wish you well with your podcast, and I will join as well. I'll subscribe and share, and I'm all about cross promotion. So I will definitely cross promote your stuff, and hopefully we will see a lot more of you in the future.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Perfect. Perfect. Perfect.